Curry Anton. Welcome to the Super Connector podcast.
Thank you, Alec. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so lovely to have you.
Yeah.
So you are an old friend from college. We have traveled many miles since we last saw each other.
Yeah.
And you've lived a really interesting story, which I've
Hmm.
only heard a small piece of at this point. So I want to get into some of the chapters of your story. But let's first start with the present moment. So where are you, and kind of what is your life like where you are right now?
Okay. Great question. Well, I am currently in Italy, where we live. I'm actually right now about an hour outside of Milan, up in the north. This is where my partner Luca is from. And we are currently quarantining at his mother's home. So we got back from Africa. We were back there where we have been living for the past 10 years in Tanzania. And my son and I were back there for the past 5 months and just got back almost 2 weeks ago. So we're coming up on the end of our quarantine now,
Mm,
feeling a little bit like a bird in a cage at this point, ready to spread our wings.
yeah.
And so on Sunday, we'll be heading back down to Florence, where we live. So we moved there about 1 year ago, almost exactly 1 year ago. We moved there right at the beginning of the pandemic last year. And so Luca got a job there. He works for a wonderful company called Treedom. They do international reforestation projects. And our son Sasha is in a really sweet little nature school out in the countryside. And so we had just kind of gotten established there, or excuse me, we hadn't gotten established there. Well, there's a lot of parts to that story actually, but we moved there at the beginning of the pandemic last year, and so after the first number of months there of being in lockdown and then coming out, and Luca starting work, Sasha starting school, and me just getting our feet on the ground, rooting into a new place and a new language and a new culture. And then Italy was going back into lockdown. And so I said, basta. And we were already planning to go to Tanzania for the holidays. Luca had some work that was going to bring him back there, and we wanted to go back and see our community. And so we went back. We were going to go back in December and ended up going earlier. We went in November and then ended up continuing to extend our tickets there. So we ended up being there about 5 months and just got back. And so here we are in the moment.
Wow. Yeah. So you've been having a contrasting experience of pandemic life in Tanzania and in Italy.
Yeah.
That sounds like there's a lot to discuss simply with that.
Yeah, simply with that, we could do a whole podcast on that. Yeah, it's been really different. The experience here was it was the first place in the Western world where it hit, and we were right by the epicenter. And so we were actually in transition, literally in transition, when the country shut down. And so I guess back up a little bit, we can talk about more of our life in Africa and all of that coming up. But we left almost 2 years ago. We sold our farm and left our life there and our whole project that we had created. And we were just really feeling this call outward and feeling like, okay, it's time to go be closer to family. Our son was almost 2, and we'd been there almost 10 years. And so really feeling like it was time to come outward and emerge from this unique experience that we've been living there. And so we spent most of the year traveling. We spent time in South Africa, and then went back to Tanzania. We're in Zanzibar, and then came up to Italy, spent the summer in Sardinia, and then went to the States to see my family. So we were in California and Hawaii, and then came back to Italy. It was, I guess, November of 2019. And so we're like, okay, great. Like, we're going to actually root down and like create our life here. Like, that was the plan. And so right then I got offered a job for Carpe Diem, an experiential study abroad organization that I've worked for many years in collaboration with. And so they hired me to create a European program for them. And so they run these 3-month experiential gap year programs. And we'd been hosting them for many years in Tanzania and been working with them a lot. And so it was like, okay, great. And so hit the ground running when we got here. So it was like November, December, January into February, where we were just traveling, creating this program and making contacts. And so it was, the program was going to be Italy and Greece and looking at climate change, but through a lens of resilience and regeneration. And so really looking at these resilient communities here, really looking at this, the example of these old traditional ways that are deeply based in regeneration and care of the land, and all of these amazing opportunities. They were going to work the olive harvest, the grape harvest. It was going to be in autumn. And so they were going to work the grape harvest in one place and then the olive harvest in another, and go to all these places. So it was like, great, put together this whole program. Meanwhile, we're kind of like, where are we going to live? That opportunity had us traveling a lot, but we hadn't really rooted down into where we were going to be. And so then on one of those last trips, we passed by Florence, and a friend of Luca's, an old friend from university, said, there's this amazing job opportunity. He's been working for Treatum for many years. If you guys want to move to Florence, there was an opening for a forestry management position in some of their projects, and so said you should apply. So Luca applied, got the job. It was like, okay, this is now where we're gonna be. And so then we went to Greece, came back, and we're like preparing to move to Florence. We came up here to pack our things. We had gone down for like a week to find an apartment, kind of get oriented, and then came back up north here where Luca's family is based. And then where we had all of our belongings still in boxes a year later after moving. And then we were on our way down there and stayed at his brother's house. And that day, the whole country went into lockdown. And so it was just a pretty extreme circumstance. And because we couldn't come back up here to where we had been, they closed all the borders between regions as well. And so we couldn't get to Tuscany, where we were supposed to be moving to go and live. And so we got a Airbnb apartment last minute. They were going to shut down Airbnb, everything shut down. And so we literally got an Airbnb apartment last minute and stayed there for what we thought was going to be a couple of weeks, and ended up being there for, we thought we were going to be there for like a week or two. The initial lockdown was like 2 weeks. And then we ended up being there for almost 6 weeks, in literally a 1-bedroom tiny apartment in the middle of the concrete jungle, no access to the outdoors. If you had a dog or a child, you could go for one walk around the block once a day.
Oh my God.
And it was like, oh my God, it was so claustrophobic. I've never felt more like a caged animal.
Yeah,
it was so extreme. Yeah. And it was at that point, there was just, which there still is, but there was just so much fear and so much unknown. And it was just really, yeah, it was really intense. So Sasha, our 3-year-old, being locked in a box with a 3-year-old too, who has a ton of energy, he would get his energy by jumping on the bed. We're like, okay, jump on the bed, like, and we would set up tiny obstacle courses like all around the tiny apartment. Yeah, it was really, really
Wow.
an extreme circumstance. And then after about 6 weeks of that, we finally, like, if you had enough reason and paperwork, we were still waiting for his Luca's contract to come through and for our apartment contract to come through. And so at that point, things had come through, and so we had all the paperwork. So we like geared up, masked up in the car, and like skip the border basically,
Oh, wow.
to the next region. Yeah. I know, and there's actually more parts to the story, but they don't all need to be shared. But
All right, so we got a little room switch, got some light, and that's a wild story. So it sounds like there's a lot of stories within that story.
yeah.
Being quarantined with a 3-year-old in a 1-bedroom Airbnb. Probably don't need to focus on that part too much, because that sounds like a little bit like challenging to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, we literally like had our overnight bags. I mean, we were not prepared for
Yeah,
what was happening.
that's really extreme.
Yeah.
So you were able at some point to leave the country then. How did that
Yeah.
happen, and why did you choose Tanzania?
I chose Tanzania. We chose Tanzania because we had been living there, for so many years. And so it really was still what felt like home, where Italy at that point still didn't feel like home. We had arrived in that situation, which made it very difficult to get oriented or feel grounded or feel like we knew where anything was. And so we had been planning to go back for the holidays anyway, and my sister was there as well. She had been planning to come visit us in March, when Italy shut down, and so just rerouted her plans to go back to Tanzania first, where she was also going to go visit. We had all been gone almost a year then, and so it was feeling like time. And then Luca was also having work that was going to bring him down there through Treatum. He was going to go visit with some of the forestry groups that he works with. And Tanzania was one of the only places that had remained open and had very few cases of COVID, and was really having an approach that was not based on fear and that was not based on intensive restriction. There's a lot more to be said about that as well, and that has since shifted. And not everybody agrees with the way that it was handled there either, but the truth was that it was overall incredibly peaceful and gentle and welcoming, and we felt incredibly safe and healthy there the whole time. And we had a space to go be. Our farm is still in process of being sold, and so we still had access to it. Our whole community still lived there. So it was really like we just got to go home and feel comfortable and have space to run and roam, and just like endless access to nature, which was the opposite of what we felt being in our little apartment on a busy road in the city. And so it was like an incredible breath of fresh air and freedom and expansion.
Wow.
And where our farm is so remote. And so it was like, we're naturally isolating. We're naturally not seeing other people. We're naturally getting to just be distant and safe and free. And so it was a really good choice. I felt like when we left Italy, I was just feeling so claustrophobic, and like my cup was feeling pretty empty. And after our time back in Africa, I just felt so rejuvenated and so nourished. And so that was a really good thing for all of us.
Yeah, it sounds like a massive contrast between the two.
Yeah, it really was.
I feel like, one thing that's very clear is that this pandemic and lockdowns and everything has just been like incredibly hard for the city dwellers. and people who live out in the country are kind of like, you know, oh, you want me to wear a mask when I go to the store? Okay, like, sure. But it's not the
Once
same
every
like feeling
couple
of
of
being locked in, you know, like that.
yeah.
I'm super grateful that we had access to parks and the beach. I mean, they did close down the beach for a while here, which, you know, I consider to be a massive mistake in public health policy, but we don't need to go too deeply into that. What I want to get into more is how that story came to be. So you had a farm in Tanzania. What were you doing there?
Yeah. So I moved to Tanzania in 2010 with my sister and her partner at the time. And I had been to Africa twice previously, once in university, actually, when we were together at Warren Wilson. I studied abroad in Uganda first and then traveled all over East Africa. And then right after we graduated in 2008, I led a group for Carpe Diem, a 3-month experiential education program there to Uganda, Tanzania. And for as long as I can remember, I've always felt the call to Africa, like from when I was a child, just feeling that deep, deep, deep draw, that just call home, that call to the motherland. It's inexplicable, but it's very true. And when I first went there, I was like, this is how I always imagined feeling here, was how I felt. And I just felt like
Wow.
I'd come home in so many ways. And so when I first went there, it was that affirmation. And then going back, it was like, yes, this is where I want to be. And over those years, really seeing the way the world was going and seeing, my consciousness open to the larger systems at play on our globe, and those systems that were really creating the experience for so many people, and seeing, how can I be best of service amidst all of this, and how can I truly live a life that lives in most alignment with my values, and those values of simplicity and connection to the earth, and of gratitude and of service, and among many other things, peace being high among them. And so I really felt very called to root in Africa. And so my sister and I and Jose at the time, we created Ohana Amani, which is an organization. Ohana means, in Hawaiian language, it means family. And the definition of family in Hawaiian culture is all those who breathe together. And so it's every living, breathing being on the planet. And then Amani in Kiswahili, which is the language spoken in Tanzania and elsewhere in East Africa, it means peace. And so really our intention and our mission was to build peace between those who breathe together, and create a space for that to be true, and to create a space where beings could feel safe and come into harmony. So many of the issues in the world today I see as a deep consequence, let's say, of disconnection. And so disconnection from ourselves, disconnection from the land, disconnection from each other, our communities, from, Great Spirit, God, the universe, source, whatever you want to call it. And so by bringing connection, we can heal, and we can heal ourselves through that, and we can heal others. And so that really was our intention, and that's what we did. And so there's,
Beautiful.
again, a lot of stories in there. Yeah, but we had a beautiful piece of land there, and created a retreat center. And we called it initially Ohana Amani, and then LEC living example center, and we said, you know, if we can't ask these things of the world, if we're not willing to, if we're not truly living into these things within ourselves, you know, as our dear friend Gandhi says, we must be the change that we wish to see in the world. And so really took that to heart and said, if I, you know, want to see these things, how do I truly embody them, and how do I start with me and then watch those ripples spread and create a space for others to come and practice and know that there's not one way to be or do that, but that it's about practice. And it's about creating a safe space where we can share those tools for our tool bag, and create a space where others can come and experience what that feels like, and then take that out into the world and be those ripples. And so, yeah, we created that space, Ohana Amani, and so it was a community of sorts, and living, working, permaculture, biodynamic farm. We had a huge garden, and so we would do a lot of cooking and baking and a lot of work with the land, and then bring that into the kitchen, farm to table sort of things, really using all of these mediums as a form for teaching these practices and learning these practices ourselves. And so yeah, we did a lot of retreats where we would do yoga, meditation, intention setting, a lot of consciousness practices, and then working in the garden, moving your body, working with food, learning from the culture that you're being immersed in, taking so many lessons from Africa, and from the land that, yeah, incredibly deep, rich motherland. And offering that to others, and really creating a space for the sharing of life skills. And again, like I said, that knowing that there was no one way to do that. And so considering everybody a teacher and everybody able to bring and share life skills for improved livelihood. And many things.
Wow, yeah, that's really beautiful. What a beautiful vision you created.
Thank you so much. It is alive and well, and even though we've left, it was really beautiful to go back. This was the first time I've been back since we left 2 years ago, and to see our whole Tanzanian community is still living there, and the garden is being loved and tended, and they are living in peace and harmony. And it doesn't mean life doesn't happen, but that the fabric of peace that we all co-created there is still very much alive and well. And that was so, oh my gosh, so affirming and heartwarming and really beautiful to see.
Yeah, yeah, that's an amazing thing to create, you know, especially like to be able to do it across the world like that seems more I guess it seems more challenging and more exotic in a way. Like, because you know, even to make something like that right here where I live seems like it would be a tremendous undertaking. And then to do it in another country where maybe you don't speak the language as well, and all of, you know, everything's different. Do you speak the language there now?
I do. I speak Swahili.
Mm,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It took some time, but
I
do.
can imagine. Yeah, there's some
Yeah.
languages that are closer than others to the ones we know, and
Yeah, it was one of those languages I was like, I've never really heard this before living there. You know, I had, when I was leading the Carpe Diem group, we took like a 1-week Swahili course, and that was the only official Swahili I've ever learned. Everything else has just been experiential and been, you know, on the farm and in the market and in the community. And so it was definitely a process, but it's also one of those languages that it's hugely about the greetings and about the human to human connection, and it's such a culture of the human to human connection that it was interesting you said, it sounds like it would be more difficult, where in a lot of ways it was actually easier, because it's a culture where people are still connected to the land and people are still connected to each other, and so there was so much less like convincing. It was just like, oh yes, like this is a different form, this is a different version, but like these ways of being at peace with one another and being in harmony and working with the land and creating space, like a lot of those gratitude. It's a culture of deep, deep, deep gratitude that is held as a very high value. And so in a lot of ways, it felt a lot more in alignment than I felt being in the States. And had I been trying to create the same thing there, where I know it obviously would have been possible, but yeah, it fit in a lot of ways. It took a lot of work,
Yeah.
that's definitely true, but it really, yeah, it worked.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to touch on that. I think that's it's interesting to hear that perspective of it being easier to blend it with the culture there. Because I do think that
Mm,
this is kind of like the thing that is bothering us the most about living here. And
mm,
I would say also is kind of like the biggest issue we face in society right now, especially
mm,
certain Western societies, is that we have this deep disconnection from the land and from,
yeah.
as you said, it's like this disconnection from source, disconnection from the land, disconnection from each other. And I think, yeah, living in Los Angeles is definitely, it feels like that is kind of the root illness
Mm,
of the people here, the culture here, and kind of like the sickness that we feel
yeah.
being here. Because there's no, I mean, I guess our closest connection with the land is basically to, um, go hiking or get in the ocean, feet in the sand on the beach.
Mhm.
So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. I think that's kind of like the transformation that we need to figure out.
Yeah.
So
I think how I see it and have experienced it is that in so many Western cultures, and particularly, and I'm speaking very generally, of course, there are exceptions to all of these things, but is that we have really taken ourselves out of the cycle of nature. And we think that we're separate. And so we build
mhm,
societies based on the notion that we're separate. And we try to control the natural cycles, and we try to build over nature in all these ways, and then we try to access it in these incredibly limited ways, whereas so many indigenous cultures, they never forgot that they are nature, that we are nature, that literally is who we are, and we are not separate from it. And if we think we're separate, we are going to do what we're doing, which is bringing ourselves to the brink of extinction,
mhm,
and that's a reality. And so I think that was one of the things that really drew me to Africa. It was being in the majority culture that remembers they're a part of nature. And it was being in the majority culture that remembers that gratitude is is a force, and that love is a force, and that these things are truly a force, and that they're essential parts of life and keeping us connected to the whole, and that none of it is a given. And so giving thanks for everything, and yeah, acknowledging that death is a part of life. I think that's something we've really done to our detriment in our Western cultures as well, is that setting death separate and apart from life, as if that's the worst possible thing that could happen, rather than the only guaranteed thing that's going to happen, and the only thing besides birth that we're guaranteed. And so it's like this incredibly essential, beautiful, natural transformation. Yes, there's emotions that come with it. Yes, death is its own thing for sure. That's a huge other conversation, but that it's like those things that we have tried to compartmentalize and take out of the circle of life and say, oh, well, that's not nature. That's not nature. We're not nature. We're separate from, we're above. And that's just not true. And so I completely agree with what you say, is that root illness and that root sickness, and it is, and it has created so many of these issues that we see, just clear natural consequences. And Mother Nature is reminding us in so many myriad ways all the time that we are nature. And when we're out in nature, we remember, you're like, oh yeah, right, this is me. I'm reflected everywhere, and I can't live without any of this. No life can live without Earth. And so that's a little bit of a tangent, but yes.
Well, I pray that we remember.
Yeah. So that's been a big part of our work, is to help people remember and to get them out bare feet on the ground and hands in the soil and fresh food, picking, from the garden and cooking that up and saying, oh, right, I remember that if I connect to nature and put this in my body feels better. And then I feel more awake. And then I'm able to connect more. Like, what does true health look like in ourselves, in the soil, in our relationships? And so helping people to remember that, and to remember what that feels like, maybe for the first time. A lot of people, it was the first time.
Wow.
And then they're able to carry that and share that. And that's what's so beautiful to witness, is, oh, right, it's just because maybe we've never experienced it doesn't mean it's not right there for us at all times. And that's empowering.
Yeah. It's completely natural.
Yeah, it is.
The most natural thing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So that's quite a vision that you manifested. I'm interested in, like, how did it come to be, and how much of that did you, like, visualize beforehand? How did you bring it about?
Yeah, great question. 100% intentional manifestation for sure. Again, in so many unexpected forms, and that's what I love about manifestation, or what I've come to experience is get clear on the aspects and let go of the package, and get clear on the elements, and then let go of how it's going to come, because the way that it looked was really different than I envisioned. And yet when I look at our lists and our vision boards, and we made tons of those, and it's like literally checked every box, but the package of how it looked was different. So a lot of it really was before we moved. My sister and Jose and I spent about a year living in Portland, Oregon. And in sort of our preparation phase, I had just come back from leading the trip to Africa and was so affirmed, this is where I want to be. Chevy and Jose had never been there. And I remember calling Chev on my first trip. I was in Uganda, and she was in Hawaii at the time. And we were both at, like, having these really high peak experiences in our lives, just like fully coming alive, fully recognizing the vision. It was all coming clear. It was like, okay. And calling her and being like, this is it. I found the motherland. Like, send me money. Let's get land. Come over here. And so that spark really being, ignited there on that first trip, and just having so many visions come in of how this could look and how this could be. And it was like peeling off the layers down to the root cause of so many of the things that I was seeing and experiencing. And on that first trip, when I was in Uganda, I was studying development studies. So really looking at a lot of grassroots development and looking at a lot of gender studies. I worked with different NGOs there. I was doing a lot of peace and conflict resolution in Western Uganda, an area that's very conflicted. And so it was just like, wow, what is at the root of so many of these issues? And so that's really what that time was. It was like seeing this, of illness, of poverty, of domestic violence, of all these things that were coming from these root issues. And so it really, and it was a deep time of getting to know myself, being so confronted and so really exposed to so many different parts of the world and the ways people were living and experiencing life. And it was deeply humbling. And it was also, a deep awakening of, you can't be changing any of this if you're not going to be changing yourself. That's where to go. And then when we are more wholly ourselves, then we are able to, influence the fabric of reality that we experience. But so it was really,
influence the fabric of reality.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I think that's what.
So it was really.
I just wanted to say, I think that idea of co-creation is one of the magic keys. It's like, it's not like I am making all this happen. It's like, right. Spirit flows through me, and and
definitely
through that channel being open, so much can manifest. And also, like you said, I want to highlight that it doesn't always show up like exactly how you thought it would, but it is like the elements of what you decided to create. So like not getting too attached to like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but more like, what does this vision look like and feel like, and what's the next move I need to make to bring myself closer.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
And how do I allow these things to flow through me? Truly, like you just said, like, how do I become a vessel for these things? And so what we really did, going back to our time in Portland, that like preparation, we really sat down and we said, what are our values? And does my life really reflect this? And if I value community, am I living in community, living in a city where I don't know any of my neighbors? Like, is that, and community can look a lot of different ways, but does that truly reflect that value? And if I value simplicity, does getting in a car to go drive to have all of my needs met in different places, and that compartmentalizing, does that actually reflect simplicity? And if I value connection to nature, does having to go seek out nature in these far reaches, does it reflect that? And so it really was a step-by-step going down that list of some of our values felt highly reflected in the way we were living, and a lot of them really didn't. And so it was like, how would I live more fully into this? And does this place really resonate with my values and how I desire to live them out? Not that other people couldn't find that there, but I didn't feel that, and I didn't feel that strong resonance. And then we really, went about looking at what do we desire to create? What is the world we desire to participate in, and how can we be a part of creating that? And so we made a beautiful vision board. We made a lot of those lists of manifestation. One of my favorite tools of manifestation is something that we kind of gleaned from different places and then wove into our own activity that then we offered a lot to our students and to different people who would come and be with us. And one of them is looking at, what are my legitimate needs, and making a list of those. What are my deepest desires? Looking at those. What do I bring to the table? What are my skills? What are my offerings? And really listing all of those things. And then what are my values? And then based on all of those things, creating a holistic vision that encompasses those things. And that encompasses your needs, because if our full needs are not being met, we're not going to be of much service to others. And if I'm not fully aware of what I'm desiring to create and bring forth, then I'm probably not going to get there in a very direct way. And I do believe we learn a lot by contrast. When we know what we don't want, we know more of what we do want. But getting clear on what those desires are can be really helpful, as well as getting clear on what can I bring, what can I offer, and then getting clear on those values. And so that was a huge part of our process, as well as just our willingness for adventure, our willingness to learn, our willingness to be led. We are sisters of faith for sure. And so I absolutely believe that there is a higher power that's looking after, guiding us at all times. And when we really connect with that we are guided and protected. And doesn't mean there won't be challenges. It doesn't mean, life won't continue to unfold in unexpected ways. But that was a huge part of what I know supported our success, was our willingness to jump and let that net appear, because of that faith, and because, just trusting for sure, even in the extreme discomfort. A lot of times it was not always easy.
I mean, I can imagine. It's like really a lot of putting yourself out there, and I mean, again, the idea of doing this across the world and in a foreign country is like, it makes it feel, it must have been a learning experience of so many layers.
Oh my God, so many layers.
Whenever I travel to
just like, go ahead.
Whenever I travel to a different country, I realize that it's just like you're like a different person there. You know what I mean? Like the Los Angeles Alec is not the same as the way that I feel or the way that I act or the way that I am anywhere else, really. I think we're so much co-creating with our environment. We're reacting to it and it's reacting to us, moving together. And just something interesting I've noticed about from living in many different places is how big that contrast is. Mm-hmm. And I know you've been to a lot of different places. Would you say that you've noticed that same thing? You also speak a lot of different languages, which is or a number of different, more than I do.
I would say that's definitely true. And I think it's interesting. I don't know if you're familiar, I'm only so familiar, but I think the practice is like electrocartography, perhaps, or astrocartography.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like reading the ley lines of the body and the energetic ley lines of the earth. And like that we all have different resonances in different places. And it's actually been on my wish list for a long time now, is to have a reading done.
Cool.
Because based on my own experience, I can observe that being true, but I think that would be really interesting. They can be like, oh, you would actually really literally, since it's a vibrational planet and we are vibrational beings, like actually be in resonance with these parts of Earth that have different gravitational pulls, different, energetic frequencies. And so I think that's really fascinating to think about. And it has been true for me. where I look at places, I'm like, I just resonate differently here. And I really felt that going there. I was like, I feel in a different frequency. I feel in a different resonance. This is not my home. This is not my language. And yet somehow I feel like almost more myself than I often do, you know, being in parts of the US or being other places. And I really think that that was a big part of what supported our success as well, was like this feeling of somehow being at home in myself in a different way. And I would also say there's like part of it that was maybe based on naivete that like why we were able to just like push so hard and keep going through so much discomfort and through so much newness and through learning this new language and everything, where it was like, wow, there's a lot of places we could have stopped and taken a different path, and somehow that like just didn't feel like an option. It was like, no, we're on this mission and we're going to make it happen. And it did.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of open doors and signs along the way. And again, I think a lot of that comes back to deep listening and to faith, where it was like, I would ask and meditate and listen, am I supposed to leave? Is this not supposed to be happening? Am I supposed to go do something else? And it was just like, yeah, you keep going and you breathe and stop and take rest and keep going, and one foot in front of the other. And so I think all of those things combined definitely supported the fruition of that vision. But I would definitely say that that's true. I feel like different versions or like different aspects of myself in different places, which is so interesting coming here, because I sort of don't fully feel myself yet here. I'm like, oh, kind of who am I here? Like, what is the version of Curry that wants to emerge here? What's in resonance? What feels like, oh, this like clothes don't quite fit yet, like what's going on here? And Italy and Europe has never been somewhere that like my heart or resonance has called me towards, and yet it's always been a part of our family lore. My grandmother was adopted, and my maternal grandmother, and so she didn't know her heritage and never pursued it and never wanted to know about it. And so she always felt in her heart that she was Italian, and and then traveled throughout Italy, taught Italian history, like really developed this Italian identity for herself. Mima was her chosen name, which is an Italian name, Mima Foggi. Marion May was her given name. And so she just loved it. So I grew up with like these images of Italy, and Tuscany and Umbria were always like her favorite parts. And Florence, this incredible city of art, was always like her favorite. And now I live there. And so I love that beautiful full circle connection. Actually, another full circle connection is that my parents were married in Italy 35 years ago, like 20 minutes from where I am right now, from where Luca's from. Wow. They were married at a villa on Lago di Como, on Lake Como, where Luca's uncle was a chef, like within a year of when they got married. They're in the 80s. So I love that. Those are some signs that I look to always. It's just where the synchronicities, that's always something to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's cool to see it cycling around like that.
Yeah. And so when the first time I came to Italy actually was the first year we moved to Africa, and my grandmother was 84, and she always had this vision of having her whole Italian family back in Italy together. And so she says, I'm going to Italy this summer. If anybody wants to meet me, join me there. I'll see you there. Wow. And so she rented an apartment in Firenze, in Florence, for a couple of weeks. And we all convened converge. Like my sisters came from Hawaii where they live, and my uncle was teaching art in France, and we all like converged in Florence. And it was the first time that I came here and was like, oh, now I get it. Like, this is so beautiful and this is epic. And it just, yeah, opened me up to a new part of myself where I was like, I hadn't felt this call to Europe. I was like, oh, I'll go, later. I'll be in India and Africa and, Latin America until then. And I finally was open to it and really did feel that resonance and fell in love here. And then it was really beautiful because my grandmother passed away this last year, almost exactly 1 year ago now. And it was right after we had moved to Florence. And not only am I partnered with an Italian man, but my grandmother now has an Italian great-grandchild, her first great-grandchild, who is like proper Italian and speaks Italian and now lives in Florence, her favorite place, on earth, basically, besides San Francisco. And so that was a really beautiful full circle moment as well. And then just going back to the original question, but yeah, feeling myself coming out here in different ways and finding how that resonance feels and kind of figuring out, who am I here? And how's this going to be?
Yeah, it seems to be a game we get to play over and over again. Who am I here?
Who am I here? Which is exciting and kind of tiring sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
I just crave the familiar.
Sometimes it seems like it should be easier to know who you are, but
we're always evolving.
There's lots of layers, yeah, layers and layers and layers. Yeah. So astrocartography, just to say one thing about that, are you a Leo, is that right?
I'm a Leo Virgo cusp on the Virgo side, August 20th.
Oh, you're on the Virgo side? Oh, I never knew. I always thought of you as a Leo.
That's interesting. Most people can pin me as a Virgo, but I'm right on the cusp.
Cool. Yeah, because I was just going to say, I think, different signs are associated with different countries, and I'm pretty sure Leo is Italy is one of the Leo countries.
Oh, is it? That's interesting. I had never heard that.
I think so. I should double check it.
I'd like to see that map wherever you've got it hidden.
Yeah, well, I'll have to look into it for you. Now that you bring up the astrocartography, my wife and I are both into astrology, and we actually that was part of the way that we met each other. She was manifesting a partner who she could talk with about astrology, because I think she had.
I'm not done yet. I love you. Okay. Ciao. Buonanotte. Ciao. La cuccia.
Yeah, so she had, I guess, a previous partner who was kind of like, skeptical about spiritual stuff and astrology, and she was like, I'm gonna manifest somebody who I can talk to about astrology.
Nice.
When she said that to her friend, and her friend was like, oh, I wouldn't wait around for that. That's like good luck.
She didn't know what was coming.
Yeah, now I won't shut up about astrology. So I was just saying, we should use that tool in finding our new place, because it's kind of been.
You definitely should. It's one that I've been really wanting to. Yeah. And how I understand it, I only know one person who has had it done, but is they like kind of rank places. And it was interesting. It was actually a friend of a friend. So it was a story through a friend, but her friend had it done. She lives in Bend, Oregon now. And the friend had just moved from like one of the hardest times of her life up in, I think, Fairbanks, Alaska. And it was like a terrible time, like really hit rock bottom. And then moved to Bend, was getting settled, had this reading done, and the man was saying, you know, here's the, kind of this rank of these different places, and he was like, and at the bottom it was like they were graded or something, was like an F was Fairbanks, Alaska, and he's like, and you don't ever need to live there. And she was like, I just moved from there, and I wish I'd had this reading done before I did that, because it was the toughest time of my life. So I like those kind of stories that that affirm that. Yeah, I think it would be very helpful. I'm ready
That's
for a
so
reading.
funny. Don't ever move here.
Right. And she's like, oh geez.
Yeah,
But how accurate.
it would be good to have that information before we go. And it's also funny
Yeah.
because Bend is top of our list basically. So
Hmm.
that's interesting that you chose that story.
Yeah. One of my very best friends lives in Bend. If you do move up there, got some good contacts.
Awesome. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So you're in a new chapter now.
This is so fun.
Yeah. It's awesome to hear your story.
Okay.
I want to hear,
Okay,
yeah, I
sorry,
want to
go
hear a
ahead.
little bit about what's this current chapter you're in? What are you writing right now?
Yeah, great question. Um, well, this current chapter has been hugely about family and relationship and, you know, establishing that foundation. And so I feel like now that we're coming to this new place, um, a big part of what drew us back was to be close to Luca's family. His whole family, not his sister lives in Spain. His mother is up here in Brianza, and his brother and wife and their kids just moved back from being abroad as well for about 15 years. They were in Kenya and Nepal and then in Myanmar, and they just came back about a year before us. And so it's just this feeling of yeah, being closer to family and that support network with our son as well. And rather than feeling any kind of like push out of Tanzania, it was feeling a call towards something else.
Mm,
And so we chose to come back to Italy. I wasn't feeling that drawn to move back to the US, as drawn as I am to be close to my family. I miss them all the time.
mm,
Italy felt like a good middle ground for us for a lot of different reasons. And so yeah, I am in the process of kind of weaving my next dream, and I feel like it's this next phase where I've been really like watering this garden of raising our son, you know, growing and birthing and then raising our son, and really diving into this experience of motherhood and coming out of this experience of having created like really this very big scale holistic picture of what we had envisioned and created and held, and like really holding so many other people and so many people's experiences. And so this really was about like bringing it back in to me, and to each of us individually, like, you know, Luca and I, of like, what do we need and what do we desire at this time, and for Sasha and like for our little family unit, not we need to create this whole big community to hold, because, you know, the world needs so much from all of us. And it was really like calling that back in and reassessing and reflecting, so what is this next phase? And so for me, what I'm really feeling called to these days is a deep call towards focusing on my creativity, and my work of writing. You know, writing has been a practice for me for as long as I can remember. It's been my main creative outlet, but it's something I've always and pretty much only kept to myself.
mm.
And so finally feeling this real call to let that emerge, and to share. And so I'm working on a book of poetry right now. And I am working on a book of stories of our life in Africa, and really, yeah, working kind of to frame that based around the elements and the four directions. And so we'll see what emerges there. But it feels like it's time, yeah, to let that voice emerge more and let like my more creative voice emerge, where in our life in this previous chapter it's been very creative with my hands in the dirt and, you know, holding space and creating workshops and all these things. And I feel, yeah, more called towards other things now. But I also really, yeah, I'm feeling very called to work with the sacred feminine and work with the work of rerooting us into the land and rewilding this earth and rewilding ourselves, and particularly related to the divine feminine, you know, not just for women, but for all of us. We all have feminine qualities that need tending, and supporting that with the rising of the divine masculine as well. But yeah, bringing that balance into being more. And so I've been, yeah, working on some different things
Yeah,
along those lines. Yeah.
like a lot. So that's Virgo is one of the best signs for writing. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's like, so it's a Mercury ruled earth sign.
Okay.
And Mercury being the planet of like, of in one way is like communication. It's all about getting our ideas out there and being able to communicate and move freely. You know, Mercury, the planet Mercury moves very fast. So there's this kind of like constant motion with Mercury ruled signs, which are Gemini and Virgo. And Mercury in an earth sign, meaning like taking intellectual concepts, moving it kind of from the ether, from the air, and putting it into the earth element, meaning like making it physical. And that's like super literally what writing is. And
Yeah.
art creation as well, but I think specifically writing because of, again, like the connection with communication that you have with Mercury, and being able to like, yeah, like put your ideas into physical form. And then Leo is a sign very much associated with creativity and expression. So that kind of like combination between the two, creative writing, is a good activity for that cusp.
Thank you for affirming that. Yeah, it feels that way, and it just feels like getting out of my own way with it, and yeah, allowing more space for it to come through, where yeah, getting over those old stories of being nervous or feeling vulnerable, or, you know, not feeling worthy or not feeling good at something, and just, yeah, allowing it to be true. This is my voice. These are my observations and experiences, and just being more willing to share myself in that way.
Yeah, beautiful. Something I've noticed about writing and speaking in particular is that it does feel a lot more vulnerable than just making art, like making visual art. To me, I think that it's like, yeah, I think something about putting your ideas out there, like putting your written word down, is like, yeah, it feels like you're kind of exposing yourself in a sense, in a very different way.
Yeah, I find with visual art, it kind of leaves more up to the interpretation of the observer, where, yeah, the written word feels more literal. It is like having to be, which is, I think, why I also feel drawn to poetry often, or I think I'm feeling more drawn to that as my initial kind of mode of expression, where I look back at my poems and I'm like, yeah, I could share this. But when I think about like writing a book of my stories and other things, I'm like, ooh, maybe not yet. Like that feels a little bit more vulnerable somehow, even though poetry is very intimate as well. But yeah, those are interesting observations that you say.
Yeah, I mean, poetry is just so much more like free form.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, my book that I wrote is nonfiction, and it's all about this idea of yeah, like how to love ourselves. Really, is what it comes down to, and it's very much through like my journey of kind of realizing how much I was not expressing that, even though kind of like intellectually I would have said, yeah, like of course I love myself, you know.
Hmm.
But then there was a pretty big disconnect between how I was actually acting and that kind of intellectual idea. But it's funny how vulnerable it feels to like to put out a work about love, you know. It's almost, yeah.
Even when you're like, this is my experience, like this is true for me. But I think sometimes, yeah, when we speak our deepest truths, it's when we feel the most vulnerable. You're like, I could write all day about something else, but when it's from the heart and from our own authentic experience, it can feel very, very vulnerable, because it's, yeah, it's showing um, that authentic self that you are. I'm
Hmm.
so excited to read your book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
excited to
please.
share it. It's been a lot of fun. It's kind of like it's the first version right now, so
Okay.
I'm working on illustrations, and I'm actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it into a manifestation journal that people can use. So you
Beautiful.
it you can read it, but you can also write inside of it. So I like
Mhm.
that co-creative idea, the
Yeah, I love
co-creative way to
that.
interact with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and as a tool. I mean, as all
Hmm.
books are, but in that physical way, that's so awesome.
Yeah, it's it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah. What's
So
it called?
it's called the Love Attraction Manual.
Nice.
Yeah, the title is very descriptive of what it is, but
Yeah,
it
super
it
useful.
is very much like it's more about self-love than it is about finding a partner, but it is connected with like the process I went through within myself to attract my partner. And it
And
was,
love attraction, you're attracting that love to yourself. I mean, within yourself,
mhm,
and growing that, and generating more of that.
mhm.
And then when we do that, then Kumbe, surprise, we attract that externally as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was unable to attract it with it until I had sort of made those adjustments within myself, for sure. I found that to be true for many other people.
Yeah.
And there's also this idea of like, okay, well, if you seek a relationship with the need to, complete yourself, you'll sort of always be chasing this fulfillment from somebody else, which leaves you incredibly vulnerable to whatever drama that person is going through.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. And I recently just heard the comparison of that, like, yeah, the need to heal through pain, or the ability to heal through pleasure. And I think that is like when we are more whole in ourselves and have more self-love, then we're still growing, we're always evolving and growing, but we are able to choose to do that then from a place of pleasure, rather than wound meeting wound, and then we're
mm,
healing from this place of pain. um
mm,
I like that. I like, yeah, recognizing that difference.
yes, indeed. Okay, so I'm curious about so you said you kind of went through this transformation, which was kind of this like big community focused vision of working with a lot of people, having a lot of kind of managing a lot of energy, and then as you transitioned into motherhood, kind of coming into this place of like really closing in, zooming in, and being within your little family unit. And it was very much the similar experience that I had, and I think a lot of young family had. I want to hear, I want to hear a little bit about how you manifested that experience, like even meeting your partner and then going into motherhood?
Yeah, great question. So Luca and I met in the small town of Njombe in Tanzania, where we were living at the time. And I had been single for a few years at that point. Um, and my previous partner was a Tanzanian man that I had been with for not so long. I'd met him on my first trip to Tanzania, and then we kind of did some long distance and then came and then left again. And so it was sort of on and off, and then came back, and we were together for just a short amount of time. And it was really, for me, it was kind of the last playing out of a lot of the patterns that I had had, and sort of dealing with the unavailable man, and dealing with father issues, and dealing with a lot of my needs to heal through a relationship, was that. And so that, yeah, that ended, and it was very clear that it was meant to end. And it was like neither of us had long-term visions of it in place, but it was like, okay, it had taught me so much. It was an incredible time of teaching. I learned a lot from it. But it was, again, kind of that needing to learn sort of through pain practice, and that playing out of stories of not feeling fully worthy, of, oh, I just have to get through this discomfort, of all those things. And so after that, I really took time. I was like, I'm not interested in being with anybody else at this time. And it worked out well, because we were in this incredibly remote area with very few appropriate suitors. And so I was so mission driven and so service driven that it just like wasn't where my attention was. And so, yeah, really got to go deep within myself, and really worked on that self-love in a way that I never fully had before, and really got to look at myself and fall in love with myself. And that was wonderful. And then I was really feeling ready, and feeling like I want a partner in this life, and I'm ready for that. And so I remember, actually, when I was on a train on that first trip to Italy, and we were on a train going up into the mountains, and I just remember writing a list. And I had just broken up with Fuad, my Tanzanian partner, and just was making this list. I was like, okay, again, through contrast, like, not those things anymore. I'm not interested in those qualities. And so what am I really up for? What do I really desire in a partner? And so really made a list of those elements, and then gave it up to the universe, let go of the package. And then it was about a year later, I guess, that I met Luca, and we were living in this small town, and he had been there the year that we came, but we hadn't met. And then I was at a friend's house, and they said, oh, Luca's coming back. I was like, oh, who's that? And so he was coming over that day to the house, and I was like, kind of just like planted a little seed in there. Who is this? And then he came over, and it was one of those things of like, hey, it's you. like I just, like, it was like I'd known him for lifetimes, which has been affirmed through other readings and seers that I've had readings done by, that we have been together in previous lifetimes. And so the first time we left that house, and he walked me home, and then it was like we said bye, and it was sort of like, why didn't he kiss me? Like hello. It was just like it felt so comfortable and so casual, but he didn't. And he was with a partner at that time in a long distance relationship, and so it was actually really beautiful, because we got to become friends first, and I had never really done that with a partner. And it was always like, okay, kind of get together and then get to know each other later. And that led to different experiences, but it was really beautiful to get to know him and get to see how he showed up. And he was our neighbor and our friend for a couple of years. And so we got to be really good friends, and there was always that energy, but I think both of us were so sort of sensitive and respectful to the friendship and to the small community and to just ourselves that it was like, oh, we'd never cross those boundaries. And then he broke up with his long distance girlfriend, and we remained friends for a number of months. And then, yeah, the energy was building, and it was actually on my 27th birthday. We had a small gathering. We had just moved up to our farm. We were living in the local town before that, and then our farm was about half an hour out of town up in the hills. And so him and some friends came up, and we had a beautiful birthday party. And I felt it. I was like, this is the night, like something's going to happen. And he kissed me that night, and that was the first just like acknowledgement. It was like, oh yeah, it's you. Like, we're obviously meant to be together. And so we got together, and it was very natural and very casual. His contract was ending, and so that was sort of, ooh, you know, you're going to be gone in a few months. And he had already been in Tanzania for a number of years, and so he was feeling kind of ready for something new. So he extended his contract, so we were together for a full year before he left. And then we went traveling together for the first time, and that was really beautiful. And then he went on and got a contract working in Lebanon, right on the border with Syria, working in refugee camps there. And so it was this experience of just really letting each other go. And it was like, if we're meant to be together, we will. If we choose each other in the future, then that'll become clear. But right now, like, really giving each other that full space and freedom. And a couple months later, it was like, I want to move back. I want to move to the farm. I'm ready. Like, I love you. Let's be together. Let's do this. So he finished his contract there, and then he moved back to Tanzania, and we lived on the farm together, and worked there together. And then he had separate contracts working for NGOs in renewable energies in the area. So he would kind of come and go, but that really became the base. And then a few years later, we had Sasha. And so it was something where I had never had that real, like, strong maternal instinct. I never was like, I for sure want kids, or I for sure want to get married, and we're still not married. And that's been an intentional choice. But I was like, we'll see. Like, if I'm supposed to be a mother, I will be. If I'm not, I won't be. And so it was clear that it was meant to happen. And so I got pregnant. And it was actually interesting because it was very shortly after I had just started to feel like someday I could be ready. Whereas before it was like, I'm just so not ready. And I had friends who had, babies in their 20s. And I was like, wow, I am so not there. And that just, like, it was not my path. And I was so grateful that that had not happened earlier. But it was, yeah, shortly after I turned 30, I was like, I think that I could be ready sometime, maybe. And I had never been with a partner before where I was like, I could see having a family together and having a life together. And so I got pregnant, and we had Sasha, and he was born in Tanzania. We had a really beautiful home water birth experience there at a friend's house in Dar es Salaam. Just an easy 39 hours of natural labor, no big deal. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God, talk about an empowering experience. I've never felt so strong in my life, and I've never, felt so depleted in my life. It was by far the hardest thing I've ever done. Oh my God, hands down. I honestly can't believe that we do it. It's like, It's why there's a chemical reaction in our brain that makes us forget, because if we remembered, we would not do it again. And
Yeah.
it's like it's so intense, and I know every childbirth experience is different, but none are easy. I mean, it's so extreme.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, but it
Yeah,
was
and you
really
don't know if
it
you've
was
never
really
like
beautiful.
seen it. You've never been. I was never at a birth until my daughter was born. Like, I had
Right.
ideas about what it was like, but a lot of those ideas were really faulty ideas gotten from movies and like
Movies that are
hospitals and
so inaccurate.
doctors and
Yeah,
just kind of like this frantic scene in a hospital bed is so different from the
yeah,
experience that we had, and it sounds like what you had
yeah,
as well. We both have
yeah,
water
yeah. Talk
sign.
about one of those water sign babies. Yeah, Sasha's a Cancer, and he was born into the water,
Mm-hmm.
right on the Swahili coast. So he was born in Dar es Salaam,
Mm,
um, at our friend's beautiful home, and it was beautiful. It's a primarily Muslim area, and so there's a lot of mosques all along the coast there. And so he came out. He was born at 4:27 in the afternoon, so it's right around the time of the call to prayer. There's the 5 calls to prayer, the adhan,
mm,
5 times a day. And so right as he was coming out, the first thing I heard was the adhan, was this call to prayer,
wow.
like blasting out the window. And so that was really, really powerful.
Wow,
Yeah,
yeah.
just feeling this, like I just brought life into the world. I've just, yeah, done the most sacred work there is to do. And here's this like audio experience, affirmation, this prayer just being called into the sky. It was really beautiful,
Wow.
and exhausting.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, what a call to prayer indeed. That's I
yeah.
got a little goosebumps when you were talking about that. That's a beautiful
Mm,
vision. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
both.
Sasha with his like deep blue, green, watery eyes in the water, and there was the water outside. It was, yeah, really, really powerful experience
That
for
is
sure.
an interesting parallel also. So we both have water sign babies born in the water and by the water, because she was born,
Ooh, I love that.
right here on the Pacific Ocean. We're a couple
Yeah.
blocks from the beach, and
Mm,
yeah, that's been a big part of her early life, is just constantly going down by the water, connecting
yeah,
with the ocean.
yeah, it's so, so special. Yeah. Um, so I forget what your initial question actually was,
Well, I think you
but
covered a lot of the manifesting your partner and motherhood, the beginning of it, but then let's get into the kind of like the growth of a child.
yeah. So Sasha, where he was born, actually wasn't our home. It was at a friend's house, and that was across the whole country from where we live. And so we spent a couple of weeks there, and then we drove back across country. It's like a 2 to 3 day road trip to get home. And so I really knew that I wanted to have his foundations be there, that was our home. And during the pregnancy, we had talked about like, oh, do we go to Italy or go to my sister's in Hawaii, or kind of these different options. It was like, no, this is his home. Like, this is where our family was formed. Luke and I's love was founded in Africa. Our whole home and community was there. And so my mother came over for the birth, which was beautiful. My sister was there. We had a midwife and a friend who was our birth minstrel. So she played music throughout the whole birth. So he was really like brought in this community. And that's really what I wanted for him. Yeah, me. She's still one of our dearest aunties and friends, the birth minstrel. She's got it
Yeah.
on her CV now.
Yeah, as she
Yeah.
should. That's a very special
Yeah.
skill.
It was awesome. Um, And so we went home to our farm and we raised him there for his first years of life. And he was so loved and embraced. And so on our farm, the community, there was a number of other families, Tanzanian families living there. And there was already 3 little girls living there that had all been born and raised on the farm. Not all born on the farm, but mostly raised most of their lives on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so had just this beautiful family to welcome him. And we come home and they've like decorated the whole house and made a big sign. And we're just like overjoyed to welcome this new little boy into their midst, and just embraced him like fully as their own, as our own. And so that was so beautiful. So from the very beginning, he was just, on Mama Mkubwa's back, his big mama, Zamda, who's his goddess mother, who is our very, very dear beloved mama, big mama of the mountain. And so he was on her back and, spent so much time with them and with the aunties and the little girls, as is, true in Africa, like the little kids take care of the littler kids. And so, the 5-year-olds caring for the 3-year-olds, caring for the 1-year-old. And so he just right away was just like swept up in that love, and would be with them and out in the garden, and they were just so incredibly supportive. I honestly don't know what I would have done without our community there, and just showing me how to be a mother, really. My mother was there and my sister was there and so supportive. And it was really those African mamas and aunties of just showing, like, how do you be with this, and how do you just bring this baby in and do this in such a deeply natural and integrated way, and just supported us in every possible way. And so it's what I wish for everybody, for every new family and every new mother, is to have that kind of support where Sasha would literally be like screaming his head off, crying in the middle of the night, waking up, and I'd be walking around the house, completely exhausted. I haven't slept in months. And I would hear a soft knock at the door, and Zamda would come in and take the baby and walk him out into the cool night and calm him down and put him to sleep. And then I could go and sleep. Yeah, it was like magic. And then in the morning they'd come get him and go take him for a walk, and I could go have a shower and, put the cloth diapers outside, and Mama Frida would go take them and wash them and deliver them back folded and clean. And it was just like this incredible integration of support. It was huge. It was huge. And so that was, that's really what I had always dreamed of. And it happened, and getting to walk out into the garden and pick our own food that we were growing and go into the kitchen and, prepare beautiful fresh meals for myself and family and for our son, and have him crawl around on the earth, and be with other little kids, and who just loved him. He was like a little doll for them. They like couldn't even handle it. Like, what? He's ours. We get to hold him and touch him and help dress him, and just like, oh my God. And by 5 there, you're like a tiny adult. And so little Di, the oldest of the little girls who we had helped to raise from when she was a little baby, and so she was just Sasha, and like and just like already putting him in his place, and like putting on his socks and doing little things, and like feeding him avocado. And it was just so precious. So again, it's what I wish for everybody. And I think that's a big shift for us coming here too, is leaving that community and not having that kind of support. And suddenly, again, in the year of quarantine, in the year of the pandemic, suddenly being like, we're gone from our home, we're gone from our community, we're gone from our source of food and life and the earth and support. and suddenly we're by ourselves in an apartment with Sasha. It was just really different. It's been a really, really different experience. And it's really been deeply humbling to see how most people do it, which is isolated in the home with either one parent or two parents, and that's it,
Mm-hmm.
for the most part. And yeah, wow. Um, Set up for hard feelings, as my mother would say.
Set up for hard feelings. Yeah, that's an interesting phrase. I think
Yeah.
it can be
And
said
no
about.
better or worse, but that, like, wow, is this fully meeting all of our needs? And what's a more natural way, again, back to those root illnesses and, in our culture, is that disconnection from support and that disconnection from community, and especially around the birth experience, and especially around bringing new life in and supporting new mothers and new families, and how hugely vulnerable that experience is. And how much work it is, and how demanding it is on the physically, emotionally, spiritual level. It's so much. And so I feel incredibly blessed to have had that support in that time. It was so life-giving.
Yeah, what a blessing. It sounds just incredibly beautiful in so many ways.
It was. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like we don't need to go it alone, like
Right.
it's
But the story is that we do, and that's a lie.
yeah, I think that's kind of like the dark side of Western and like American individualism is like, yeah, like the individual is super important, and like it absolutely must not get lost in terms of like moving forward as a society. And we don't need to do anything alone. Like there's no like this whole idea of like a self-made man or a self-made woman, like it's complete bullshit. Like we're completely interdependent, there's no like there's no survival without each other. There's no survival without nature. There's no like the separations are all illusions.
Yeah, completely.
But yeah, there's this kind of like
go ahead.
There's this kind of feeling of like, I don't know, maybe it's pride or just like, yeah, the connection to the need to being like completely self-sufficient, self-sustaining family units.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like
so much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's such a setup for bad feelings. Like it's really yeah, it's too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we need each other. We need support.
What we're seeking is that, I mean, yeah, we're seeking that, but we also like we do have it here, like our Emily's parents are here, and her brother lives here. He's become a good friend of mine, and we surf together, and he takes care of Coral sometimes, and well, he's our babysitter actually. He takes care of her every week. Yeah. So yeah, we're starting to have some community here. So the idea of like leaving and starting over is already kind of a lot, but what you spoke about having like like that really close connection with your community, and also like just letting your kids go out the door and play, have their feet on the earth and be safe right where they live, like we're surrounded by city streets, so she can't just like go out,
Right. Yeah, it's not safe. Yeah.
We do have a nice like separate courtyard area where she's, it's all fenced off, so that's a good safe place. But I think the vision that you created is a lot like what we are manifesting now.
Yeah.
So it's very inspiring to hear you tell the story of it.
Yeah, I'm so excited for you guys. Yeah, we're in the process of recreating that here in some fashion or another. Yeah, definitely. we got the taste of that, you know, what you're saying right now in this last while of being on a busy street and, you know, not being able to walk outside and put our feet on the ground. And yeah, to me, it feels like starvation.
Yeah,
Um,
it is.
and I know, yeah. And again, everyone has a different experience of it for sure, and without judgment, but just like what my actual experience was, I was like, I feel like I can't breathe, and I feel like I can't actually like be myself. I felt that like severance of
Mm,
life source, to not be able to put my feet on the ground at my home.
hmm
And so that's something that we're definitely manifesting quickly is a space.
hmm
Now where we are, we're not in that tiny place anymore. We're at slightly bigger spot that has a little shared backyard. So we do have grass out back, which is great, and a beautiful view of the Tuscan Hills out behind, but it's, you know, minuscule compared to the 70 acres, and then, you know, just farms and hills and wilds on from there that we've come from. And so I'm really, yeah, just ready to be in a more wild area again, for sure.
hmm
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I think the theme of suffocation is definitely a good way to describe the past year. It's just like this, both physically and like metaphorically being
Right.
constricted, being suffocated is.
Yeah, truly.
Whew,
Yeah, and I just have such deep compassion for those who live that way always, you know,
mm,
whose lives
yeah.
are that way, and so incredibly blessed at the privilege to be able to have access to wild nature and able to have access to our feet being on the ground and to choose that for my son. You know, that is, it's an immense privilege, and I'm so grateful for that and wish
Mhm.
that for everybody.
Yeah,
I truly, yeah.
and it's the natural way, you know.
Yeah.
Like we've chosen to separate ourselves from it through
Yeah.
through some sort of collective collective insanity that.
Amnesia. Yeah.
Yeah, amnesia,
It's
that's a good.
so quick and so debilitating. Like our ancestors, yeah, would never have chosen that.
Hmm
I mean, in some ways they did in recent generations, but yes, I completely agree.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how it unfolded because I think there's a lot of benefits that come from it too. So I think that
Completely.
like the current pathway that we're going down is now to like to integrate all the benefits of modern society and technology and you know, Western medicine with the, you know, the older practices, the ancient practices,
Mhm.
the, you know, the wisdom about how to heal ourselves that has been forgotten and you know, yeah, as we've said quite a few times, like living in harmony and with nature is like it is the way forward for our, you know, to survive individually, but also to survive as a
As a speaker.
collective, as a species.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I know the earth will be okay. You know, she'll regenerate whether we're here or not. It's, do we want to be around for it? Do we want to be a part of it? Do we get to be a part of it?
Yeah, and what is the quality of that experience, you know?
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
we're yeah, as you said, the planet will survive and we're what we're doing right now is just kind of like yeah, like polluting the surface of it to the point where it is has become unlivable in a lot of different places.
Yeah. Yeah, I get so inspired by the concepts of rewilding and regeneration and resilience because it's so possible to heal even so much of the damage that's been done. And I think sometimes we get stuck in that story of it's to the point of no return. And you know, it's true, we can't return, but we can regenerate, and we can, you know, tap into our own resilience, and we can tap into the natural resilience of nature. And you
Hmm
know, we can change the course right now.
Yeah.
We can rewild, we can do that. um And so I think getting out of that, like deer in the headlights, it's just gone too far, fuck it, just, next. Like, it's only me, it's only this generation. Like, no, come on.
Yeah, let's
We have so much more agency than that. Let's use it, so that our
yeah.
children can survive and thrive, and their children can, and all the other species, that are in it with us.
Yes. We have tremendous capacity to heal.
Yeah.
It can happen very fast even.
Yeah, I love those images of what's happened, over this year, in certain parts of the world, of just like certain parts of India being able to see the Himalayas again for the first time in decades, because of how much smog has cleared, because of how much less transportation has been happening. And just
Mm,
those as small examples have been really beautiful in this time, definitely parts of the silver lining of this whole experience of the pandemic.
yeah.
Just people being at home with their children, and not having to go out every day on that rat race, on the grind. And there's been a lot of other challenges, of course, but I think there's been a lot of lessons that Mother Earth has been granting us. Go home and sit in your room and think about what you've done, and think about if you want to do it differently. um,
The whole world
and
getting
so I
put on
think,
timeout.
yeah, time out.
I think I think that's super important point. I would, if I was in control, I would put everybody in timeout in nature, not locked
Me
in their
too.
homes.
Go to the woods, be quiet, be still. Yeah, we did a lot of that with our groups in Tanzania. We would send them on solo days, like day-long vision quests, and that was always the most powerful time for people. They're like, I've never
Mm,
been quiet and alone in nature before, mostly in my whole life. Very few had. And so yeah, it was just always that affirmation of how powerful that is, how much we
yeah.
can gain from the experience. Yeah, everybody go be
Be
quiet in
quiet.
nature.
Be quiet in nature, everybody. I'm gonna go do that right now.
Yeah. Nice.
Sounds great. The ocean has been a constant like source of regeneration and reconnection for me. It's just like, yeah, every time I go in, I feel like I'm coming out transformed.
Yeah, it's so healing, so cleansing and rejuvenating. Yeah,
Hmm.
all of the elements in their own forms.
Yeah, one thing I like to think about the beach is that it's this perfect elemental convergence. It's like
Mhm.
where the land meets the sea,
Yeah.
but also like you tend to have the fire and the air in abundance there too. It's kind of like that, you're hitting the four corners. And yeah, I think there's a special reason why people are drawn to that specific convergence. But
Definitely.
also something I heard recently was like the closest vibration to pure source energy is light, and
Mm,
the second, a very close second, is water. So like
mm.
to be on the water or in the water or near the water with sunlight shining is just like, to tap into source.
Yeah, I'm a California girl too, and I
Mm,
miss the ocean so much. I've not lived on water in a long time, and I really, really, really miss it.
mhm.
Yeah, I've heard certain statistics before saying, populations that live on bodies of water report being happier than,
Mm.
those that live elsewhere. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I
Yeah,
believe there's some truth in that.
I believe it for sure. I mean, I can just tell it from my personal experience. That's
Mhm.
always been something I seek out to, like, if I need to reconnect or change my, get an attitude adjustment, whatever,
Yeah,
do my prayer, affirmations, whatever, I'd go to the water.
go to
When
the
I
nearest
grew
source
up
of water.
in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a city that is kind of it's built on an isthmus in between two lakes, and there's a couple other lakes around, so it's really easy to get to the water
Mm,
side kind of from wherever you are. And for a long time, I had a practice of every single night I would go to the water for sunset, and I would watch the sunset over the water, and I would just sit and read or write or whatever during that time. I was a teenager, you know, but I was like kind of speaking out
Nice.
this
Good.
spiritual practice without really knowing what it was.
Yeah. Listening to the guidance. Absolutely.
Hmm.
For this last month that we were in Tanzania right before leaving, my friend Mish and I, the birth minstrel, she lives on our farm now too. She has for the past couple of years. And so there's a beautiful lake there just down the hill. And so we were doing mindful march daily dunks. So we'd hike down the hill and do a quick naked dive into the lake and swim around, and it's cold.
Yeah.
But it was so good. And you're like, whether it's sunny out, whether it's raining, it was the rainy season. So we had some cold rain dunks, but it's just so life-giving. And at the end of every single time, I'm like, I just feel so rejuvenated, every cell of my body just feeling awake and really alive. And so I love that feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm having
Beautiful.
that nearby. It's part of one of the things on our list is being by water for this next home that we're manifesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Us too. We're not trading. I mean, we're probably not going to be right on the ocean like we are, but we are. Source of water on the property is definitely like top of the list. And living on land that has more abundant water, I think something you realize when you're in LA, and especially when there's kind of like a time of crisis, is like,
Right.
oh my God, like this place is like we don't have our own water. There's millions of people, and like if stuff breaks down, this is going to be a bad situation. Like it's just
Yeah, quick.
that's what it is, you know, and
Yeah.
it's really easy to see it, especially if you like, yeah, you know, if you try and leave the city at the wrong time of day, even it's like, oh, like you just can't leave. Like
Yeah.
it's completely filled with cars.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. It's,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah, that was one of the reasons we actually, among those other reasons, our values, etc., but was, yeah, where can we have access to all of our own resources, and where is that
Mhm.
affordable, and where is that accessible, and reading the signs of what's going on, and paying a lot of attention to those sorts of things. It was clear that something like this was coming, and more
Mm.
is coming.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so really, what we created in Africa was a sanctuary in those ways as well. And so it was really strange to be caught away from that in this time.
Hmm.
It was like, oh God, again, where are our resources? Where's our source of water? Where's our source of food? Where's our source of community and safety and all those things? And so that was a really big reminder and wake up call and affirmation of those reasons why we had chosen and created what we did.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I I understand what you're saying for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I want to close out with just kind of like, so I'd love to have you remind us of what are your highest values and what are you creating moving forward?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, that's such a great question. One that I ask myself regularly. Um, I would say currently my highest values are um, source, God, connection to divinity, um, as the source of everything. Love, truly leading from a place of love and connecting through that place of love. Peace, generating a place where peace can thrive within my being, within my family, community, relationships, and in the world, knowing that, again, we do influence the energetic fabric of the world, and that starts within each of us. And joy. how can I be more of a joyful conduit? How can, in this world where so many feel really a darkness and a heaviness right now, how can I be a vessel of joy and um, and remind everyone that that really is part of our birthright as well. And we are sort of geared these days to look towards the darkness, to look towards the problem, towards the issue, and to stay so deeply engaged in that. And yeah, I seek to bring a lightness and an upliftment, which doesn't ignore, but it uplifts, like an elevation of energy. And so what I'm creating is a place where I can outwardly express all of those things, and creating a place where people feel safe to come and feel safe to be themselves and feel safe to try out loving themselves and being in connection to nature and reroot in this Mother Earth and reroot in the true nature of our own beings, how to rewild ourselves and rewild this planet. So those are some of the things.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thank you for doing that work. It's yeah,
Yeah.
it's we have a lot of the same values, and it sounds like kind of a similar mission going forward. So it'll be interesting to check back in with you and see what you've been creating.
Yeah, likewise. I want to be in person. I want to give you a big hug. Let's
Yeah,
hang out sometime.
yeah. Let's
Yeah.
please do that. Have our little ones play together and hang out on the farms.
Yeah. That would be beautiful. It will be beautiful.
It will be,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. Well, Curry,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. Is there
Thank you so much, Alec.
if people want to get in touch with you or hear more about what you're doing, is there a way they can find you?
Um, yes, I guess I've recently gotten on Instagram, so I guess that is maybe a good sort of public way. I don't have a current website or anything like that. Our Ohana Money website is no longer. Yeah, I would say reach out via Instagram, and then I can share my personal email and other ways of connecting if that's desired.
Hmm. Awesome. I will put
Yeah.
that in the notes. And yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here, Curry.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alec, for being who you are and doing what you're doing. It's awesome.
You too. We'll see you
Yeah.
next time.
Okay, big love. Ciao.
Okay, so we have one final important message before we wrap this thing up. Curry?
And that is to find what your work is and your purpose and your joy is, and to do that, and to not compare it to what anybody else is doing. It's not about hearing somebody's story and thinking, oh, that's, so far-fetched. That doesn't sound like anything I could do. It's about doing what you can do. And we are all unique parts of this puzzle, and we are all unique participants in creating the future and creating the reality that we're living. And so find your own joy and find your own way of being. And that may be small, and that may be big, and that may be in little tiny subtle acts that never get recognized, but it's important. It's all important. So you do you and bring that. We need it. We love it.
Yes, indeed. I like what you said. We need everybody right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all
Really
matter.
do. We all matter, and it's not about comparison. It's about shining your unique light and then joining those unique lights together into a brilliant ball of healing love for the whole world.
Amen, Curry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alec. Cheers.